Hello, how's everyone doing? And welcome to this video, which is how to go from one house to two houses. And basically, what I'm going to show you is the three largest strategies on how to increase your real estate portfolio. But essentially, for a lot of people and families, I talk about my children and I say, hey, how are they going to be able to afford a house when they grow up? So I'm going to teach you exactly how to go from owning your current or hopefully one property to two properties and so forth. And I'll give you the best strategic ways that people have done and what I've done and exactly kind of basically how to do it. This is the 101 of that. So this is basically strategic wealth planning using real estate. My name is Philip Hyduk and this is my family. I'm from DukeRealtyHomes.com, realtor in the GTA. And to be honest, this is a lovely picture that we actually took in the summer of 2022. I really like it. My kids are 5 and 2. One of the problems that's really got me bothered is that the real estate market is so expensive here in the GTA. Bubble, no bubble, we'll see, but it's still going to be very expensive, and it's very unlikely for the average family to be able to afford a house, let alone your kids in the future. So that made me think and realize that the only way my children are going to be able to afford a house in the future is if I help them out. And that is actually what I've done before. So I'm going to show you a couple techniques that I've used and other strategies that people have used to make that happen. Okay, one of the things we have to quickly just point out is that according to September 2022 stats, so the last month, the average house in the Greater Toronto Area, this is taken from the Toronto Real Estate Board, is $1,134,000 and change. And if you do a quick math, if you were to try to buy this as like your first time home buyer, you would need to have an average income of about $200,000 to qualify, plus the necessary down payment, which would probably be around 10 to 20% at the bare minimum, certainly at least 10. This shows you how incredibly unaffordable real estate is. Now, obviously, we're talking about the average house, and if you were starting off, you want to start off much smaller, and that's definitely possible. But it just gives you an idea of how expensive everything is and what you, as a consumer, need to look at. These are the numbers. So another thing I want to point out is that how incredibly important it is for someone to buy a home as soon as possible and basically sit on it for a while. So we're going to do a quick case study. These we call the possibilities, the tenant versus the buyer, and we call it the reality. So let's take a look at John and Jane. They are identical twins. And John's side of this chart is very simple. John's been renting. He decided to rent for 5 years. And it is worth noting that after 5 years of renting, you see a lot of zeros there. The reality is that when you have your rate of return, rate of investment, you're renting, you don't own anything. So your ROI is zero. How much equity have you built up? So how much money do you have? It is impossible when you're renting because that money goes to someone else. And collateral. So collateral is important because let's say John wants to go and buy a car and they say, okay, what kind of collateral do you have? And we can give you this loan or we can give you the car. And he has none. He doesn't have a house. He doesn't have anything else. And a house is, on average, the largest collateral that someone could have. Now, ideally, collateral is not as important as the rate of investment and the equity. Goes to show you that after 5 years, if we're doing case study and you know a John, or you are a John, this is your future in 5 years. It's the same thing in 1 year, same thing in 10 years. But for the benefit of this video, we're just doing 5 years. Now let's take a look at Jane. So I've updated these numbers to reflect the current market. So basically, Jane bought a house for $600,000. And that is probably an entry-level freehold home on the outskirts of the Greater Toronto Area. And you could buy a condo with that in the GTA for sure. And maybe even some small townhouse or something. But let's just say that it's an entry level purchase for buying your first property. Now, if you see that there's a lot of numbers here, and I'm going to explain that to you. So if you're going to buy a house, you have to have at least 5% down payment. Now, it is worth noting, I didn't really put it in here, but for the first $500,000 of property value, you'll need 5%. And after that, you need 10%. So from 5 to 600,000, you need to have 10% of that. But for this simple equation, we're just going to put 5%. You look at the acronyms, it's 5%, DP is down payment, CC is closing costs, so there's land transfer tax and lawyer fees. CMHC fees, so anytime someone purchases a property with less than 20%, CMHC has additional fees that they put on top of the mortgage. And basically for Jane, if you put 5%, which is $30,000 plus closing costs plus CMHC fees, comes out to roughly $53,000. So for her to buy this house, she needs $53,000 either saved or borrowed or gifted from a family member and so forth. And that is one of the themes of this video, is that you really have to help your children. So you have to do it for them, right? You have to gift them the money, or you have to purchase these properties and sit on them so that they are more affordable now than in the future, because God knows what the prices of these real estate houses may be in the future. And so what I've done is that let's say she gets a 25-year amortization mortgage at a 5% fixed rate, which is basically today's rate. And if you run the numbers and you compound an appreciation of 5% per year on the property, which is very realistic, to be honest. Even in a down market, 5% over 5 years on average is actually quite realistic. It is historically been very, very accurate for the real estate market. In fact, for many years, it's been a little bit more, around 7%. And we don't need to talk about the crazy years. Those are just bonuses. But let's just be conservative and say over 5 years, every year in the real estate market, houses have gone up by 5%. Okay, they could be more, they could be less, but this gives you a rough idea of what happens when you buy a house and after 5 years you come on top, as opposed to borrowing. So, and what we get here is that if you look at the little chart right there, is that on the 5th year, the house that Jane bought is worth roughly $765,000, and there was a little bit of change, but I rounded up at a 5% annual growth. So what we really want to calculate is how much did $53,000 in down payment end up being in profit while owning a property. And if you look in the green box, so after 5 years of gains, which is now the property value is $765,000, and she had owed $547,000. So what I did is I took the $600,000, I deducted $53,000, $547,000, and to her name, the house value, the equity has gone up by $218,000. So if she were to sell, minus some commissions and different fees, she'd be looking at that ballpark number. Let's do a quick little experiment and say borrowed. Imagine she just borrowed the $53,000 at a 7% interest over 5 years. And so that ends up being $53,000 and plus $18,000, $550 of just interest. So it comes out to $71,000. So if we look at the $218,000 of equity that she owns in her house minus $71,000, $550, so the $53,000 plus 18 and change, that means she now has a net worth of $146,000, $450. There's a couple things you have to realize here. One is that if you add the green box here, that means that Jane has borrowed the money and she's gone from $0 to $146,000 to her name. This is incredible over 5 years. This is how people build wealth. This is how people get ahead. Alternatively, it also shows the value of owning a house, how now she has options, right? She can pull out some equity, she can sell the property, move into a better property. Maybe she can sell this and buy 2 properties. So we're going to talk about that in a second. The other thing I want to point out is that even though when I made the calculation and I subtracted $547,000 of what she still owes on that mortgage, it is actually not accurate, because it doesn't include any of the principal that she's paid off while owning the property, whether she's lived there or she's rented it. If she's rented it, even better. She hasn't paid her mortgage. Her tenants have paid her mortgage off, and so maybe she also deducted her mortgage by like $20,000, $30,000, $40,000. So that's an additional savings. But for the sake of this argument, I'm just going to keep it very simple. And if you guys have questions about this, reach out to me and I'll do the calculations for you to the T. All right, so now let's get to the meat and potatoes. So this is what you really want to know is you know how important it is to purchase a home and sit on it for a while. Eventually, the market will take care of it. You will build equity. What do you do? How do you get from one house to two houses, right? How do I help my children be able to live in a house in the future that they own or that I own, that I give them, whatever the case is? At that point, we have options as long as we execute one of these three strategies. So strategy number one is very common, and it's sell, buy, and leverage. Leverage is going to be the biggest word here in all these three options because it gives you how much money you have to play with, gives you leverage to go ahead and make purchases in the market. Number one, sell, buy, and leverage. So you live, whatever house you live in, let's pretend you have a moderate amount of equity. So not like you've paid off the whole mortgage, but maybe you have half of the mortgage left. Let's say that's $1 million property value, and you have $500,000 in equity. Well, what you could do is you could sell your current home and you could use the $500,000 or so in equity to buy a home that you were going to live in. It's going to probably be a little bit cheaper than the one you live in. So something a little less. So you're downgrading essentially. But you are also saving some money on the side for an investment. And the average investment property is going to go for around, let's just say 600,000, just like Jane was talking about. So that means you're saving around $120,000, 20%. You're putting that on the side. You're buying a different house that you want to live in, and you're renting out the investment property, and you just sit on it. And essentially what happens is that you now have two different mortgages, and you're going to increase your leverage because you're paying off both mortgages. Ideally, your investment property, you have tenants paying off your rental property. And the best rental properties are duplexes or multifamilies. But even a single family home could be an excellent investment because it's very simple. Just one tenant, and tenants these days, there's a lot of duplex style homes. So if you say, hey, I'll give you the whole house, you just pay a little bit of a premium. There are a lot of people out there that are willing to do it. So one tenant, less headaches too. So whatever you're into, that's okay. I'll help you pick the best fit investment if you decide you want to do that. Now, what's really interesting about number one, and really about all these, is you'll see that there's a lot of R5 years. So what R5 years means is that, I'm teaching you how to get to one property to two, but at the same time, you're also learning how to use your leverage in the equity of the properties that you own to continue to invest into real estate. And you can invest, one or two investment properties. You can go and invest into like 4 or 5 investment properties. It is to note that the average bank will give you a harder time to purchase more than 5 homes. But let's start with just one investment property and then slowly build from there. So as investors, it is a slow process. You buy your investment property, you want to use your equity, you're going to live in the house, whatever house that you can afford to live in, that you're okay with, and then you sit on your investment property. Now, after 5 years, you can refinance each property that you own if you want to, assuming that just like Jane, who built all that equity into her property, she could pull out the equity, refinance it at the current interest rate, and then pull out up to 80% of the equity. So maybe she could pull out exactly $120,000, $130,000, $140,000 of equity, $150,000, depending on what she wants to purchase. And whatever 80% turns into, it is actually going to be just enough to pay for a $600,000 house with closing costs, lawyer fees, refinance expenses, all that stuff. So what you essentially hear in number one is if you have a moderate amount of equity and you're okay to sell your property, or that's just the best possibility, it's actually very good to do this if you have a good fixed rate. Because let's say you got a nice fixed rate a year ago at like 2% or 2.5%. If you were to refinance, you have to pull out the money and then have a new mortgage at the current rate, which right now is like five and change for a fixed rate, which is quite a big difference. It can get expensive. So if you had a fixed rate from before, uh, you want to call your lender, you want to call your bank and say, hey, if I bought a new property and I sold mine, can I just port that mortgage? And absolutely, most of the time you can. So you can just keep your 2.5% interest rate, fixed rate, buy another property using the money in your house, move it that more interest rate over to the new house, and therefore you keep your expenses down. So this is a great option for people that have a little bit of equity and they have a good fixed rate. And if you just have variable, that's fine too. You can make this work. The second one is a much more aggressive strategy. This is one where you'll see people, maybe you know someone and you say, wow, I can't believe that person he owns, 3, 4, 5 homes. All of these kind of really give you the option that once you have an investment property, you can continue to refinance and invest into more properties later on. So even in case of number one, you see number three, number four. So if you were to sell your current house, buy an investment property, buy a new house, sit on it for 5 years, the average appreciation is 5 years or more, you probably will be able to refinance both properties at around the 5 year mark. The reason why 5 years is important is because mortgages typically renew every 5 years, so there won't be any penalties if you refinance. Well, they'll be very low. You'll be able to figure it out with your lender and your bank. They probably reimburse you for any fees. You can then use the extra equity while still owning your current properties to try to buy another property, possibly two properties. Now, number two, refinance and multi-leverage. You have a house that has lots of equity. Maybe you have no mortgage. Maybe you've paid off 80%. So again, looking at the $1 million mark, if you were to, let's say, just have a mortgage of $200,000, you can pull out a lot of equity, right? And you don't have to pull out 600,000 or anything crazy like that. But you like the idea of having an investment property and you want to get aggressive. You know that if you do this correctly, right? Again, strategic wealth planning. I'm here to help you guys. If you do this correctly, refinancing your current property, you're pulling out enough equity to buy two investment properties in the same calendar year, essentially. So let's say you want to buy two $600,000 properties in today's market, like Jane, then you're going to be pulling out $240,000, which is 20% down payment for each property, plus closing costs, maybe another $30,000, $40,000. So let's say you round it out to $300,000 you're pulling out. So now your new mortgage of your current home is going to be $500,000, 300 plus 2 is $500,000. But you're going to be able to buy two other properties, investment properties, and that is going to really get you further ahead very quickly. You get those rented out, get your tenants to pay for them. And the beauty of this is that, you saw a picture of my kids. My kids are very young. They probably won't need access to their own home for another 20 years. So if you were to use a strategy like this, where you bought a couple investment properties, then 5 years later, you refinance all those properties, and then you bought, you see number 4, number 5, number 6. Okay, it's up to you. Some people are very aggressive. Some people are, take it easy. They take less risks. But it is a way for you to get numerous properties. And if, let's say, 20 years goes by, there's a couple huge benefits here. One is you could already have completed your real estate investment portfolio. So you could be set for retirement and just sit on those properties, let the rent just build, let the equity build. Then you have more options. You could sell, you want to travel around the world. Secondly is that it gives you a lot of years for tenants to pay off your mortgages for you to really build on paying off a lot of principal. And whenever you feel like you can stop refinancing. This one is very aggressive. A lot of people have, especially a lot of elder people have a lot of equity in their home. And if you feel like you're someone that's a little bit older and you don't want to invest that much, that's okay too. But I'm just giving you a choice because when you have a lot of equity in a home, and this kind of goes back to the old grandma mentality, where a lot of immigrants used to come into this country. I'm an immigrant as well. A lot of people have come into, the mindset, especially of the older generation, is to work hard, buy a home, and then work hard again to pay off that home as soon as possible so you have no mortgage. So a lot of people are sitting on a lot of equity, but the reality is that if you don't buy an investment property or you don't use your leverage to build your investment portfolio, you're going to be left behind because your whole value is in the equity of your house plus whatever you have saved. But for most people, that's exactly what they have in their house. So it's a lot better to own numerous properties than it is just to own one property. And I'll show you a little bit about that later. Now, the third possibility is vacate, buy, and leverage. So in this case, let's say you love your current home, you don't want to sell it, and you talk to the bank and they say, you know what, if you refinance your current home, again, you have a moderate amount of equity here, not a lot, but a decent amount. You can actually just refinance your current home, then rent out your current home. You can buy a bigger home, perhaps, if you can afford one, or you can buy just a different home. And so there's a different way, a different spin on number one, where you're selling your house and you're buying a different home to live in plus investment. This one, if you love the property that you own and it makes a lot of sense, you can always give me a call. I'll tell you if it makes sense financially and so forth. Then you can buy another property that you want to live in while keeping the current house you have. And then again, if you wait 5 years and everything turns out okay, you can refinance those properties for more investment properties. So these are the three general ways of being able to build your real estate portfolio. Let me show you guys a quick case study about growing your net worth and what it means, the difference between buying one property and two properties using the exact same amount of money. So here on the left side, you see one home. You're buying one home. It's a 25-year amortization, a 5-year fixed mortgage, and then you can switch the mortgage after 5 years. But let's use the average GTA home price. So I'm going to round down to 1.1 to make easy numbers. So both sides, you see that we're putting $220,000 down payment. On the left side, you're buying one home for $1.1 million. On the right side, you're buying two homes. You're splitting up the money to two $550,000 homes. One of them you can live in, one of them you can rent, or you can rent both out. Either way, I'm going to use the numbers as if none of them are currently really rented right now. Then you could add the rental income as well, and so forth. But without complicating too much, let's just look at these numbers. So basically, if we assume the 5% appreciation rule going forward, on the left side, having bought only one house, after 5 years, it is compounded to now a value of $1,404,000, also down to the nearest thousand. And I've also done a little calculation there that after 5 years of paying 5% interest, the principal payment, so the amount of money that you've paid to your mortgage that actually goes to paying off your house, your mortgage instead of the interest, is $101,000. So if we look at the numbers here below, the value of your home after 5 years has gone from 1.1 to 1.404 million. The amount of mortgage remaining is 779,000. Gross equity. If you take the amount of money you put down, the appreciation of the property, plus the amount of money that you've paid off in the mortgage, that's the gross equity of 625,000. Not bad, from 220 to 625. And then if you just calculate the amount of money, so you take your $220,000 and you remove the amount of mortgage you've paid off, but how much has that $220,000 grown to now based on the current value of your home? It's $524,000. And then net equity basically means how much money have you paid off in your mortgage since you've owned it. So net equity is $101,000, which I'm going to show you why this makes a difference by owning two homes that have exactly the same value. And so if you can own two or more, then the numbers get even better. Whether that is similar value, but we're just using the same value here just so everyone understands how it makes sense. So if we go to the right side, now we've bought two properties, both at $550,000 using the same down payment. After 5 years appreciation, both those properties are now worth $702,000, which means we've paid off $63,000 of our mortgage. The rest of it's gone to interest. So after 5 years, $702,000 is the value of the property. We have $377,000 remaining on the mortgage. So the gross equity is $650,000. The owner's money, if you deduct the amount of mortgage we paid off and you've grown, how much has your $220,000 grown? It's actually the exact same as owning one property after 5 years, which is $524,000. But if you look below, the net equity is $126,000. So by owning two houses, you pay off more mortgage over the long term, and therefore you have a higher net worth. And this is, again, this is not factoring in that if, let's say, you live in one property and your second property is rented out, how much that tenant has paid off your mortgage. Because if you have to pay $0 your mortgage, for example, because they pay all of it through rent, then that's going to make this second, by owning two homes, even more valuable. And if you want to know exactly what those numbers come up to, then let me know. I'll send you a link to another video, or I'll calculate it for you. But the whole point of all this is that if you were to own two homes instead of one, even after 5 years, you already own more money in your name than you do with one. And if you can do this for 3 properties or 4 or so forth, remember, most banks will allow up to five houses per person. Now, we don't have to get ahead of ourselves. Just buy your second property, start with that. You can see the numbers here make a lot of sense. And if you want to know what they look like after 10 years, 15 years, again, just reach out to me. I'll show you exactly what that looks like. But you're going to be more wealthy in the future. Okay, I'll tell you a little bit about my real estate investing. Now, there's a couple more things to this chart, but it just gives you a rough idea of what I've done. I'm 37 years old now. So a few years ago, back in about 2015, I bought a property, my first property. I bought it from the builder. I saved up some money, so I was able to put 20% down. I even borrowed some money from my family just to get to that 20% mark, just to avoid those CMHC costs. And then a year later, my plan was always, because it was a townhouse, is to sell that property. So in a year, I saw that the market had gone up around $75,000 in 1 year. And so my 20% investment of a $400,000 property of $80,000 basically turned into $80,000 plus, let's say, $60,000 minus real estate fees, closing costs, that kind of stuff. So I went from $80,000 to $140,000. I was able to put 20% down to a primary house that I live in right now, and set aside the rest of the 20% into a $400,000 duplex in Hamilton. And at that time, those were the going rates for these type of homes. But I just leveraged my equity into buying that investment property, and got it rented out. And it was rented for 5 years, paying itself off. It was even making another $400 or $500 in cash per month. You have it being a duplex. And then this year, I refinanced that property, and I bought a 6-unit building up north, which is making solid cash. And that really is only possible because when you buy a 6-unit building, it is a commercial unit. You need 25% down. So this costs around $200,000 to buy that, including the mortgage. So that's only possible because I was able to refinance the investment property. So, and one thing I want to point out here is that if you look at the bottom of this graph, I have options down here. Even though my primary house, I've owned it for 5 years, and there's a lot of equity in this home because I've just been paying off the monthly mortgage amount, and the market's gone up substantially. It's more than doubled since we've owned the property, and there's a lot of equity. So I can refinance at this point to buy more investments. Also, the 6-unit building, at this point, we just sit on it. We're gonna, owning a building is different than owning a house. It's really like a business. You got to constantly try to improve the building and the units and make the experience for the tenants really good. And in return, they will pay you top market dollar, ideally, and they'll take care of your property because, you show love to them. And it's a completely different business, right? You have to put a little bit of money into it. You have to run it as a business and maybe hire a property manager, whatever you're comfortable. But after 5 years, I may be able to refinance the building again and buy more investment property with it. So the sky's the limit when you use these kind of strategies. So you see, I've used option number 1 where I sold and then bought 2 properties. And then later on, I've used option number 2, basically, where I've refinanced an investment property and then bought another investment property. And then it could just snowball from here. Let me know if you guys have any questions. My name is Philip Hajduk from Duke Realty Homes. There is my number, and we are showing you how to go from 1 house to 2 houses. Everything I'm saying here is because I've done it before, and I'm going to continue to do it. I help my clients out with that. So if you need someone to talk to about how to do this in any of these ways possible, reach out to me and I'll go through it with you. I'll make sure that you have the correct strategic wealth planning to get ahead in life and do really well for real estate.